I've been looking for this all my life.
Indy's back, and fingers crossed that we get one more giant boulder scene. It's hard to believe it's been 42 years since Harrison Ford first picked up a whip and a brown fedora and launched an action franchise. And yes, we're all old now, but this marks the 5th and supposedly final film with Ford in the leading role.
I'm retiring.
Well, in that case, what are we drinking?
So we are going to take a look at what to expect for this final offering. Here's everything you need to know before you go see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Dad told me you found something on a train during the war. A dial that could change the course of history.
Now, of course, we gotta go back and look at Indy's previous crusades, so grab your leather jackets and let's do this. The first Indy flick to grace our eyeballs was Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981. Our boy George Lucas actually came up with the idea after he finished American Graffiti in 1973. I mean, can you say overachiever? And sidebar, Ford was a real babe in that one too.
This was the most perfect, dazzling creature I've ever seen.
Now, a few years later, after Lucas teamed up with some key players like producer Philip Kaufman, screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan, and director Steven Spielberg, what was once called The Adventures of Indiana Smith was off and rolling. Only now the title was different, and it was about Indiana Jones instead. That definitely has a better ring to it. The OG actors reportedly considered for the lead were, get this, Bill Murray, Nick Nolte, Jeff Bridges, and Tom Selleck before Harrison Ford was cast, having already worked with Lucas on a couple of space flicks.
I'm in it for the money.
And now I'm just picturing Indiana Jones with that prominent Tom Selleck mustache. Anyways, in Raiders, Ford plays a renowned archaeologist who is hired by the US government to find the Ark of the Covenant, which is believed to still hold the 10 Commandments. Now, unfortunately, Hitler has also sent men after the same treasure, but don't fret because all of those baddies' faces melt off, and let's just say it's a fun watch. This film actually has the highest tomato meter and audience scores in the franchise, and it's the only one to receive an Oscar nomination for Best Picture. And it also went on to become the highest grossing film of 1981, beating out Superman 2. Sorry, Kal-El.
You poisonous snake! I hate snakes, Chuck! I hate them!
Now, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom may be the second film in the franchise, but Lucas made it a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark to avoid having Nazis as the villain again. So this one is actually set a year or so before the events in Raiders, and it finds Indy teaming up with a nightclub singer and a 12-year-old boy, who we all know and love, to recover a precious gem and several kidnapped boys on behalf of a remote East Indian village.
Why's it glow like that?
Now, not only is this film responsible for a rather buff Harrison Ford, who, by the way, did a strict exercise regimen to gain a more muscular tone,
This was the most perfect, dazzling...
but it also changed the movie rating system as we know it. Because after complaints from the MPAA about violence, Steven Spielberg suggested they alter their rating system, leading to a new PG-13 rating, not to mention scores and scores of angry 12-year-olds. Now, Temple of Doom actually did win an Oscar for Best Visual Effects, and it's also responsible for Spielberg meeting his future wife, actress Kate Capshaw, on set. I mean, a meet cute in the middle of a Temple of Doom? Who knew?
Hey, Dr. Joe, no time for love. We got company.
Now, next up is 1989's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Steven Spielberg returned to direct and said that it was his favorite in the franchise. This time around, Indiana embarks on a search for Holy Grail and in the process stumbles upon another archaeologist who had disappeared trying the same thing. Turns out that guy is Indy's daddy, played by a daddy himself, Sean Connery. Sean Connery is my James Bond.
The most perfect...
Now, another A-lister that made it into the film that we all knew and loved was River Phoenix, who opens up the film as young Indy in a fun origin story prologue. The certified fresh film, which may have benefited from the fact that Temple of Doom was deemed too dark, was the highest grossing movie of 1989 and won an Oscar for Best Sound Effects Editing. And I gotta say, critics loved it for its pacing, suspense, themes, and big stars, naturally.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
And of course, that brings us to, oh boy, here we go, the fourth one.
This ain't gonna be easy.
2008's Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which happened to be released and takes place 19 years after Last Crusade. Now, set in 1957, Indy goes up against Soviet KGB agents led by Cate Blanchett while searching for a telepathic crystal skull. Yeah, it's a thing.
That's enough. That's enough.
Now, this time, Jones is joined by his former lover, Karen Allen's Marion Ravenwood, along with their son, Mutt, played by Shia LaBeouf. It was actually the short-lived ABC series, The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, from the early 90s that helped make this one happen. After Ford narrated one episode about events spanning into the 1950s, Lucas realized there were more stories to be told about an older Indy. And I guess he was right, because Kingdom of the Crystal Skull became the 4th certified fresh movie in the franchise, surprising many diehard Indy fans because they didn't like it. But no pressure, Dial of Destiny.
Drop dead.
That brings us to this latest adventure in the life of Dr. Jones, who, as you know, is once again played by the one and only Harrison Ford. But, and this is a big but, this is the first and only film in the series not directed by Steven Spielberg and which doesn't have a story written by George Lucas. They're both credited as executive producers instead. Will that make a difference? You tell me after you've seen it. But they didn't just get somebody off the street to direct. They hired James Mangold, who's best known for hit films like Walk the Line, Logan, and Ford vs. Ferrari. Dude's legit. Now, Mangold also co-wrote the film along with brothers Jez and John Henry Butterworth and David Cope, the latter of which also helped write the previous Indy flick among many other Spielberg projects. Now, on the other side of the camera, along with Ford, will be John Rhys Davis and Karen Allen reprising their roles as Sala and Marion Ravenwood, respectively, from earlier films. And joining them are franchise newcomers Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Indy's goddaughter, Antonio Banderas as an old friend of Indy's, and Mads Mikkelsen as the bad guy, a former Nazi who works for NASA. Cannot wait for this.
Fasten your seatbelt. There might be some turbulence.
Now, as far as what Indiana has up his leather jacket sleeve for this final installment, supposedly, we know that it takes place in 1969, and he's joined by his goddaughter in a race against time to recover a legendary dial that can change the course of history. No big deal. But also, one can accomplish many things in a leather jacket. Of course, he's not the only one who's after it. It appears that Mikkelsen's character and Indy have some history dating back a couple decades. And now, Mikkelsen and his main henchman, played by Boyd Holbrook, are among the obstacles in Indy's way. And perhaps one more giant boulder for old time's sake. Is it just me that really wants a boulder to happen?
I hate him! Come on, show a little backbone, will ya?
Well, my friends, this brings us to the end of not only this episode, but also of the man himself, Indiana Jones.
Adios, señor.
Now, there were 19 years and 15 years respectively between the past two installments, which always gives us a reason to hold out hope. But you gotta think that Harrison Ford doing action roles may be coming to an end. I mean, he's still pretty badass in the show 1923 and is absolutely hilarious in the show Shrinking if you haven't seen it yet. And I gotta say, I'm sure many execs have begged and pleaded and plotted to potentially recast the role with a hot young name to keep things going. But Ford actually did say back in 2019 that this is something he never wants to see, saying, quote, "When he's gone, I'm gone, it's easy." And the last thing I'll let you know before going into the theaters is no major tears should be shed, as Spielberg has previously confirmed that the character won't be killed off in this final installment. Not saying that leaves the door open for more movies, but not saying it doesn't. Am I right? All right, you're probably more confused now, but that is everything you need to know before you go see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny in theaters June 30th. My name's Naz Perez. I'm still wearing my leather jacket, and thanks for watching, and be sure to rate and review this film at RottenTomatoes.com.